Hi, welcome to Fast Intelligent Care. In today's episode, we are going to continue our four-part series. So our part 2 with Callan Jones, our new clinical educator and OT at Enable Lifecare. So in our previous episode, we looked at her history getting into OT and the AT space. And today we're going to deep dive a little bit more into her experience working in South Africa, so working in a low-resourced context and having to think about creative ways to come up with low-cost solutions. So, Callan, first thing I want to ask you is if you have any examples of or a story of where you had maybe a low-cost solution to a problem.
Absolutely. I think in that background, modularity is the biggest thing that you can try aim for in equipment. So we would often have equipment that really needed to have an extended lifespan. We would have equipment that would often be on loan to people and would need to come back to either community or hospital setting to be refurbished, repaired, and then redistributed out. And in that way, you wanted to have solutions that could be adapted to each individual within one piece of equipment instead of having to find replacements along the way. So one of those really low cost but really modular options that you have is using foam. And I know there's amazing innovation that's gone around in terms of other pressure care surfaces like air and gels and all of these things. But in a low cost setting, foam is a really incredible tool to support people because of the fact that it can be carved out, added to, you can easily replace it. It is really relatively low cost and relatively accessible to everyone. So, for example, one of the prior devices that I used to work with was essentially just like a fiberglass box of foam and filled with different densities of foam. And what it allowed us to do with that and a bit of creativity and a bit of contact glue, we would be able to accommodate for a lot of postural deformities. So we could carve out for scoliosis, kyphotic positions, rib humps, anything like that. We could add lateral foam to the laterals. If we're looking at a seat cushion, we could cut away foam or add foam to accommodate for pelvic obliquities, for posterior or anterior pelvic tilts. So it was a really wonderful solution that let us really understand the principles about what we were looking for when we were applying seating or looking at seating or looking at any kind of postural support for someone. But in a context where if we made a mistake, you could also just add a little bit and fix some things. So it was really fun. It let you get really hands-on with the equipment and really understand what you were trying to get your equipment to achieve.
That's amazing. So you guys were actually like customizing each seated surface or backrest for each client.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And that was all just for like actually cutting the foam and stuff yourself.
Yeah, getting creative with some either serrated knives if you or like a bread knife if you didn't have electricity, or if you did, you would hopefully find an old like electric carving knife that you'd sometimes use for roast dinners, and that works like a charm.
Oh, that's amazing. And what is something that you would do, or what is kind of your thinking process if the ideal equipment wasn't available, or just wasn't there wasn't something that was realistically available if you didn't have the ideal equipment?
I think you really have to be able to be flexible and be adaptive. So I think the thing that allowed me to do that was to try get a real deep understanding of what was I wanting to achieve in terms of body positioning and understanding and getting back to the principles of correct or good seating or good postural management or good pressure management. So when I wouldn't be able to find a piece of equipment that could fit that solution, I could go back to those fundamentals and say, is there anything else in the community? Are there any other bits of equipment that could meet some of those needs, but maybe not all of those needs? And it allowed me to make more informed decisions about weighing up what were the benefits and cost of each piece of equipment, because new things would come along and you'd have to be able to analyze it and see if it was going to be supportive for your client. But also it let you explore some creative solutions. So can you use foam wedges and things like that in creative solutions for side liers? What kind of pressure care are you looking for in all of these bits and pieces of devices? So I think getting back to the principles of what you are wanting the piece of AT to achieve is really important.
Yeah, and I guess a good thing as well is like you're already understanding what you need from the equipment rather than just going for what's familiar, like
Absolutely.
a familiar brand, or but really looking at each individual person's unique needs.
Yeah.
So how would you balance someone's clinical needs with what is available in the market?
I think you have to have a real understanding of people's environment. Realistically, you can find the most amazing piece of equipment. It's alternating air. It does all the things that clinically are best practice. But if you don't understand the context that it's going back into, it might just not be the appropriate solution for someone. So, if you have something that's alternating air, it's wonderful, but it doesn't have a battery backup and suddenly someone has an unreliable electricity supply, that perfect solution suddenly isn't perfect for that person. So I think you have to keep a really individualized approach when you are considering AT, and make sure that you understand what is best practice, but also understand the person's need and really understand the environment that they're going back into, to make sure that you can balance that and get the best solution for your client, even if that means that it is slightly different from what the research papers might recommend as best.
Yeah. And I think something that's important as well is if someone already has some existing equipment in their home, there's that compatibility that you need to be aware of as well. So you might have done a great bed prescription, but now you need to get a hoist underneath the bed, and you need to make sure that that is actually compatible. And the two individually work really well for the person and do match their clinical needs and the environment needs separately, but when you actually use them together, they might not actually have that.
Absolutely. I think
that good connection.
It's one of those things where it's caught me out a few times as well, where I've done an amazing prescription and have been so focused on that and making sure that it's clinically the best thing, and the seat depth, the backrest height, everything is correct, and then just didn't consider that there's stairs or a narrow doorway that something needs to fit through. So the perfect solution can really be railroaded by not considering some of these other factors that might seem silly, but really make a big difference in the long run.
Oh, that's true. Thank you. And I appreciate your time today. That is a wrap for our second episode, or part 2, where we went through some low-cost solutions and how we balance clinical need with what is available. In our next episode, we're going to compare different contexts. So we're going to look at working in the community versus hospital practice, and look at some tips and advice for those. And then we would love to hear from you in the comments if you have any experience working in a low resource context, or you have had any low cost solutions that work really well for your client. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next episode.